Hey guys, welcome to part 3. This is the Yachtmaster exam. My exam's tomorrow. I have a lot of work to do. So passage plan was the first step for the exam. We got started that very afternoon. I was given a passage plan from Cobb's Quay Marina in Poole to Fécamp in the north of France. You'll usually get a channel crossing. I spent most of that evening looking over the tide tables, tidal heights, basically forming a passage plan. So I gave an estimated time of departure, an estimated time of arrival, was looking at the tides to see when would be the best time of day to leave. I had a bridge that I had to calculate what time it was best to go under. So then I got started on my pilotage plans. I had 3 in total. I had 2 for Poole because it was such a massive marina. So for your pilotage plan, I recommend, like I said, drawing the map and then putting what you need on it using colour. So for the port side marks, paint them red, and then for the starboard marks, paint them green. Just gives a bit of colour and a bit of life. So I was up all night doing my pilotage plans as well as my course to steer. I was up, yeah, very late. Now it's the morning of the exam. I could have done with a bit more sleep, so get up and get ready. I arrived at 8:30 in the morning, half an hour before I was due to, just because I wanted to get the boat prepared nicely and make sure everything was in place. The other guys had a similar idea, so we all arrived at about the same time. The examiner actually ended up turning half an hour late, so we were there an hour before the examiner. The examiner was flown in from Italy. He was from the UK originally. So the examiners just arrived and we introduced ourselves, have a little chat, and one of the first things he asks is, where is my cup of tea? So big hint for you guys, have that cup of tea ready because we didn't. So we went over our paperwork, all the passports, etc. and we needed to make sure we'd paid him. I discovered that there were actually 4 of us doing the exam, and because of the weather, the examiner decided to make the 4 of us pass at the same time over the next 48 hours. So we moved on to the chart, and he pinpointed certain waypoints on the chart. So one of the other guys who was picked first took the boat out. We went over just across the bay. I did a little maneuver in there, and then came out and he found his position, and then we transitioned onto the next person, and then the next, and then it was my turn. So I took the boat into Cannes Marina, spun a little 180, took it right back out, and then pinpointed my spot on the map using my 3-point fix and radar VRM. One thing I recommend is finding your position as quickly as possible without rushing. So take it nice and slow, but what the examiner wants to see is you arriving directly at that position rather than arriving and then looking around a little bit for the position. As each of us were finding our positions, we were asked to do a man overboard drill, which was completely at random. The examiner would give a little wink to the person standing at the back of the boat, and he would chuck over the rope, and all of a sudden, man overboard drill. So yeah, don't panic, obviously, just take it slow. It's pretty simple. Make sure you know where the wind is at all times. The worst thing you can do is be on the wrong side. So make sure this doesn't happen to you. So coming back to the port, the wind was blowing quite heavily. We had time to do 1 maneuver each, which was alongside the fuel dock, both engines, and then we stopped for lunch. We had lunch half on the boat, half on the dock. It was just time off if you wanted to take some time away. Then come back and we did some more manoeuvring that afternoon, but the wind was blowing quite heavily, so we returned to our berth and did some theory. For the theory side of things, the examiner told 2 of us to stay on board and 2 of us to take a 15-20 minute break. For the 2 of us that stayed on board, we practiced colregs. He had these little 3D models of boats and all the different lights and buoys and cardinal mark. This was actually really interesting because it gave a different perspective to everything we'd learned from the flip cards. It was much more like real life. So he asked us loads of questions about, for example, a vessel over 50 meters, show me the lights that the vessel would have on board. And this seems very easy, especially based on the flip cards, but the difference with the 3D models is that the lights had different angles to them and stuff, so you had to like know exactly which angle which light was at and from which side of the boat you could see each light, and it was a lot more difficult then. So once we finished with the colregs, we left the boat and the 2 others joined, did exactly the same thing, and then the examiner called us all back in and said, okay, well, because of the weather, we're gonna have to end up for today. It was about 5:30, we all headed home. Day 1's over, it was a long day, no major disasters, get in there. So I managed to get a good sleep this time, ready for day 2, had my banana in the morning, and we were off. So getting on board, we did a bit more theory with the examiner. First thing, so we ran over the engines and the engine checks. So this was a section I was a little bit nervous about beforehand. So we lifted up the engine bay and took a look at the engines. I was asked to do a routine engine check. So I referred to wobble. So obviously, because this is the Yachtmaster Offshore Power rather than sail, the engine is your only way of getting around. So you need to know how these things work. You need to know how to change or fix them in case of an emergency. And the examiners are really going to stress that point because there's no sails on board. Because the weather was pretty bad that morning, it actually started hailing at one point. We continued with the theory side of things. So we each showed him our passage plans. He was very thorough in looking at our passage plans and asked specific questions such as how long will it take to get from one point to the next, and what are the time gaps in which you can afford to leave or arrive at certain places based on daylight or tides. Thankfully my passage plan was good after spending quite a lot of time the other night doing it. One of the other candidates' passage plan wasn't very strong, and the examiner saw this and really probed into the information of the passage plan. I really recommend you have a strong passage plan and that you know it. The weather was looking a lot better, so we decided to take the boat out and do a lot of the maneuvers that we weren't able to do yesterday. The examiner told us to take the boat out of the dock and spin a UE and put it back in. So I went first for that. I was really stressed, I was excited, and got up onto the flybridge next to the examiner after having switched the engines on and prepped the crew and took the boat straight out, did a nice U-turn on the spot is what he wants to see, and pulled the boat back into the berth so smoothly. I was so happy with myself. It just went super easy. All the stress, as soon as I was on the helm, just disappeared. And then we moved on to one engine maneuvers. We were asked to put the boat alongside the fuel dock. In order to do so, we had to turn using one engine and then come alongside the fuel dock using one engine. Whatever the circumstances, unless there is a real risk of danger, always put it on the opposite side of the engine that's working. This is something the examiner absolutely has to see. Once you had the boat on the fuel dock, then it was time to take it off. So depending on what the wind was doing, you would either spring from the bow or from the stern and let go. Really important thing to do is to let your crew know what you're doing. You need communication with your crew. This is absolutely essential. So what you want to tell your crew, especially with a line that's like that under tension, is make sure you let go of the line when it's slack. and let your crew know when you're in neutral and make them let you know when the line is off. It looks very professional if you have it and very unprofessional if you don't. So the maneuvering was really the last thing that he needed to see from us. So one of us was asked to take the boat back into the berth. We went over a little bit more theory. We talked about meteorology with the examiner for about half an hour. So he would quiz us on the different stages of a weather system. So for example, what could you expect just before a warm front, for example? So cloud types are important, but they're not the be all end all. You really need to focus on what you can expect the weather to be doing. Meteorology is finished, so now we are waiting to see if the examiner wants to do a night passage or not, but in the end he didn't do it. So coming out of that meteorology test, it was the end! It was the end! It was the end for us, and he told us to go stand on the pontoon, all four of us. So we were each looking at each other like, oh God, what happens next? So at this point I felt confident because I felt like I'd done a suitable enough job, but at the same time I had no idea. I had no idea if I'd passed or not. I was very, very stressed, very anxious. I absolutely wanted to know if I'd passed or not. It was extremely important that I passed because of this job opportunity. So 10 minutes later he came out and was like, who wants to go first? So I was like, I want to go first. So I ran into the cabin and we had a debrief. He talked about the things that I did well, the things that I did less well. He made it clear that I still had things to learn and that my lack of experience showed a little bit, but he emphasized the fact that I was safe and that I did everything well. And then he said, I'm going to pass you. So obviously my smile goes through the roof, and yeah, it was a really, really memorable moment. At this point I was just so happy. I was just thinking about telling all my friends and relatives about it and the job offer that could potentially come through. I was just absolutely over the moon. I got off the boat, went back to join the guys with a massive smile on my face. They didn't even have to ask me if I passed or not. And then he made the others go. So of the four of us, only three of us passed, and we were the three who did the training with Seascope. So big thanks to Michelle and Hugh. So walking away from the boat after having cleaned it and had a nice chat with the examiner, I was on the phone straight away to my parents to let them know about the good news. And yeah, I don't think I've ever felt so proud in my life. It was a very, very surreal moment that I'm not likely to forget anytime soon. There's some good news to follow from my part regarding the job. I rang up the chief officer first thing to let him know that I had my Yachtmaster offshore, to which I was greeted with some pleasant news that I was offered a contract, so hooray! Well, look, that's the story of how I got my Yachtmaster at 18 years old. Hopefully it will help you to do it as well. No? I wish you all the best of luck in your Yachtmaster exams, and good sailing.